Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Beal, the founder and CEO of Melanin Mental Health and Ministry, which is a business that empowers Black women of faith to be intentional about self-care to improve mental health. And so in this video, I'll be sharing with you a few tips on how to set healthy boundaries. But before we can actually get into tips about learning how to set healthy boundaries, I think it's beneficial to first discuss what a boundary is. And so a boundary is simply a property line between self and others. And so typically when someone may think of a boundary, they may associate it with setting up a wall. However, when you set up walls, that means that people have to jump over them or climb over them. And the disadvantage of setting walls is that they keep good people and healthy relationships out. And so that is not the purpose of a boundary. And so think of a property line. Think of a home. Think of your neighbors. If you have a home, even if you're in an apartment, just think about that invisible property line. And it simply shows where you begin and where your neighbors end and vice versa. And so this right here is something that I drew, two circles. And so this is what healthy boundaries looks like. Because notice that the circles are separate. They are well defined. And so this is you and your personal space, and this is me and my personal space. And so this is a demonstration of healthy boundaries. On the flip side, this is what unhealthy boundaries looks like. And so don't pay attention to my lopsided circles. But unhealthy boundaries looks like meshed together. And so my personal space and your personal space is together. So we're not able to distinguish between where you end and where I begin. So that's unhealthy boundaries. And so it's so important for us to establish boundaries in our lives, because if not, then we'll become burned out. We will become frustrated in our relationships. We may notice a lot of one-sided relationships. And then we may also live an unfulfilled life because we are so busy making sure that we're meeting everyone else's needs other than our own. And so I was thinking earlier about the demonstration. Say, for example, you're in a grocery store, and I'm talking pre-COVID. So imagine if this happens now. So pre-COVID, imagine being in a grocery store and somebody's practically breathing on the back of your neck. Somebody has their grocery cart almost hitting your ankles, or perhaps you're on an aisle reaching for something and they reach over you and you're like, hold up. And so think about the feelings that you felt when the person reached over you without saying excuse me, or when they were all up on your neck breathing, or when their cart practically hit your ankles. Just think about how that made you feel. And so that was a violation of your personal space, which is a boundary. So that limitation, that limit. And so, of course, I'm sure you had some choice words. And so that may be a response to how you feel when your boundaries are violated. And so when we think about self-care, I want us to pretty much think about the importance of setting boundaries in self-care. Because at the core of self-care is they are boundaries. Okay, they are smack dab in the center. Because a lack of boundaries means that we may operate on autopilot. That may mean that we are putting ourselves at the bottom of our own to-do list. It may mean that we are doing for others to the point that we are depleting ourselves, that we are putting everyone else's needs before our own, that we're giving out the very things that we're in need of. And so we may not even be in a position to give out whatever it is, but we're doing it anyway because we don't have boundaries. And so I saw something on social media. I was like, oh, that's good. And it says, you don't have a big heart, you lack boundaries. And so I want to say you can have a big heart and you can have boundaries, but I understand the context of that post. And so just feeling like you're always available and that you jump and move and you give to no end, that's a lack of boundaries. And sometimes we often associate our lack of boundaries with a sense of loyalty. That's not loyalty. That's a lack of self-love. And so we give to others out of the overflow, which means that we are filled. We're giving out of the overflow, but we cannot give from a cup that's half empty, because that means that we are already depleted. We're giving from a space that we really don't have it. And so I just want you to think in this moment about a time when your boundaries were violated, and to even think about how that made you feel. And so here are a couple of boundary affirmations. And so one is, I value me more than your opinion. Another one, I love you, but I love me more. And so what would your life look like in 2021 if you decided to say, I love you, but I love me more? And so it is not selfish to put yourself first. How can you care for others if you do not first take the time to care for yourself? I think about when you get on an airplane, the pilot may say, in the event of an emergency, I need you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. And that's simply because you're unable to help someone else if you don't first help yourself. You need the oxygen mask. So how are you gonna help somebody else if you're struggling to breathe too? And so it's the idea of, you need to look out for you first. That is okay. It is okay, and I know that's opposite of certain things that we may have been taught in society. And so I want to share with you a couple of poor boundaries. And so poor boundaries may be an indication of taking accountability for other people's feelings or behaviors, or feeling responsible for how they react. And so that's an emotional boundary, and it has nothing to do with you. Another example of a poor boundary is oversharing. And so I used to be the person like, I'm unfiltered, period. Like, I'm unfiltered. No, I'm not unfiltered. I don't have boundaries, and I did not know when to shut my mouth when it came to certain things. Just oversharing was just too much. When I look back, I cringe. But it's an ongoing process. And lastly, another indication of poor boundaries is passive aggressiveness. And so passive aggressiveness, not really stating how you feel, but assuming that people have the ability to know what you're feeling. And so you may give the silent treatment instead of articulating how you feel. Poor boundaries. And so these are a couple of things to say to those persons with whom you may start, setting boundaries with. I'm making lifestyle changes, and I'm aware that this affects you. I believe that we can readjust. Self-care is a spiritual practice. If I traverse my boundary, I hurt you and me. If I hold my boundary, you get what you need and I get what I need. And so boundaries are an indication of self-love. And when you allow people to violate your boundaries, you are simply saying that you don't value yourself. And when you establish healthy boundaries, you create a pattern of being treated with respect. Use 7 ways to set healthy boundaries. Number 1, get clear on identity. What did God really call you to do? And so recognize that people will push you. People will push you to no end. But what is it that God called you to do? Number 2, identify your needs. How will you know when someone has crossed the line for you? Identify what that'll look like. Number 3, communicate your needs clearly and calmly. Are you really communicating to people that this is what it is? Number 4, do not over-explain. You do not have to over-explain. Number 5, be direct, but plan for pushback. So if this is, some people in your life who they have been used to how you operate, and now you're creating boundaries, which means it's going to cause some discomfort for them and you. And so plan for people not to respect your boundaries, which leads to my next one, number 6, be consistent. And so make a commitment to change and be okay with repeating yourself. So if you constantly have to say, look, this is my boundary, that is okay. And number 7, no one gets an immediate yes. And so pray about it, delay the response. And before you say yes to a request, the invitation, or an opportunity, ask yourself, do I have the time, energy, emotions, and resources to say yes to whatever it is that this person is asking of me? So just remember that boundaries are protecting your personal space and respecting the space of others. It is a property line. It is not a wall. And so we have to get in the habit of putting ourselves first, prioritizing ourselves, putting us at the top of our to-do list. And so our lives do not have to be run-on sentences anymore, because we have the ability to set boundaries. If you would like to learn how to set healthy boundaries, or even have a better understanding of what boundaries are, please click the link in my bio to schedule a consultation. I would love to partner with you and help you to become a healthier you in 2021. Holla. Get into this headband and these earrings and this belt. I mean, get into it. I love to partner with you. Whoa.